probably seen the internet trivia, a catchy thumbnail claiming there is a town so isolated and so extreme that it is literally illegal to die there. The town in question is Longyearbyen, located in the Svalbard archipelago, 800 kilometers north of the Norwegian mainland. It's the world's northernmost year-round settlement. But let's get the legal facts straight right up front. There is no penal code or criminal law in Longyearbyen that penalizes the act of dying. If your heart stops, the local police will not posthumously charge you with a crime. The reality is strictly logistical. The town has a small hospital, but no capacity for serious palliative or end-of-life care. So local authorities engineered society to relocate seriously ill people back to the mainland while they are still healthy enough to travel. This logistical engineering is a direct response to the ground beneath the town. The earth here consists almost entirely of permafrost. Local authorities did not create these rules to be difficult or quirky. They enacted a mandatory response to an environment that physically rejects the normal human cycle of life and death. Below a thin active dirt layer, Svalbard's ground remains below freezing year-round. This extreme cold halts decomposition, perfectly preserving anything buried. Furthermore, the top layer undergoes a seasonal freeze-thaw cycle. Over time, expanding ice catches buried objects, physically heaving them back to the surface. The danger of these geological mechanics became terribly apparent following an outbreak of the Spanish flu in October 1918, which claimed the lives of 7 young miners in Longyearbyen. Because the earth was essentially solid ice, locals had to use dynamite just to blast open the graves. The 7 men were lowered into the permafrost and left in the deep freeze. Decades later, scientists made a chilling realization. Ground-penetrating radar showed that the bodies were largely encased in ice. The permafrost had likely preserved viable samples of the 1918 virus inside the perfectly intact remains. Burying a body in Svalbard creates a geological time capsule for deadly pathogens. If the ground thaws, or if the freeze-thaw cycle pushes those bodies back up to the surface, those pathogens could re-enter the environment. To mitigate both the pathogen risk and the macabre reality of heaving graves, local authorities made a pragmatic decision. By the 1950s, they informally stopped burying coffins in the archipelago entirely. This informal practice was officially codified in 2008. The Norwegian regulation is incredibly specific, stating outright that coffin graves are not permitted. The law does allow residents to bury cremated urns after a rigorous application process. Even so, the total lack of end-of-life care still forces terminally ill residents to move to the mainland. Longyearbyen is hardly the only place on Earth famous for a supposed ban on death. Similar headlines have popped up regarding towns in France, Italy, and Brazil. In those cases, the mayors were dealing with entirely full cemeteries and zero land for expansion. They passed their bans as satirical political protests to force regional governments to approve new burial grounds. Contrast that with Itsukushima, a sacred Japanese island, which historically banned both death and childbirth to maintain absolute religious purity. Svalbard operates on a completely different logic. There is no political leverage at play, and no religious symbolism. The regulations in Longyearbyen are a pure, pragmatic defense against a lethal geological reality. A dramatic 2008 news article summarized these burial rules with the headline that dying was strictly forbidden. That phrasing spawned the clickbait meme, entirely obscuring the fascinating science underneath. In Longyearbyen, survival depends on a series of necessary, pragmatic compromises with an unforgiving landscape. This history feeds into modern climate discussions. A town built on permanently frozen ground now faces the severe infrastructural threat of warming and thawing soil. As long as the earth beneath the settlement remains frozen, or threatens to thaw and release what is buried inside, the environment will dictate exactly how people live and leave the island. Humans can write all the legislation we want, but ultimately, nature always has the final say over our final moments.